Welcome to the Unearthed Man podcast, the journey of becoming a conscious man. Hey all, Stephen here, and welcome to episode 68 of the Unearthed Man podcast. A big shout out to Jai from last week's episode. What a unique, terrifying experience for him. I'm so glad he's now forging forward with a new meaning and purpose. Recently, I had been engaging in a weekly call to further learn about running a coaching business. This is a fantastic group of people eager to learn, and even though we are touching base via an online video call, there is a sense of community, one in which we're all willing to help and support each other without needing to compete or gain from being supportive. In doing these calls, it makes me wonder about the Indigenous tribes' traditions, both here and internationally, of sitting in a community and being supportive of all the members without the need to seek advantage over another tribe member. There is a certain level of power when all community members are focused on the benefit of the community instead of the individual's benefit. On this point, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this unceded land and pay respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Now, a shout out to our sponsor, Surf Coast Wellness Rooms, based in Torquay, Victoria, Australia. As you know, as men, we spend much time looking after and caring for others and very little time on self-care. So now you have the opportunity to change all of that. Using the code TheUnearthedMan10 when booking, you'll receive a 10% discount on any of the services, including float tanks, infrared saunas, massages, and salt therapy. Great to use before or after a day at the beach. You can find a link to their website and the code below. Now, here are a few things to go through before we kick off with today's guest. The Unearthed Man community is comprised of men willing to support and be supported by other men, and it continues to grow. If you're a man or know of a man who is seeking his tribe or his community, then please use the link in the show notes below to sign up. Alternatively, you can message me via any of my social media channels. Secondly, please subscribe to the podcast via your preferred app and leave a review. The quickest way to enable the podcast to become more accessible worldwide is to receive a 5-star review. And by doing this, you also acknowledge and thank my guests for their time, effort, and wisdom. And finally, if you're a man struggling with a daily grind, have constant feelings of guilt, shame, or anxiety, you're feeling irritated or frustrated and have lost track of who you are, the deep inner sense that there's got to be more to life than this, then reach out so we can have a chat. Expressions of interest for my 8-week men's empowerment program are now open. I'm only taking 10 men into each 8-week program this year. So if you are interested, click the link below to join the waitlist as it is filling fast. All right, on to today's episode. My guest today is a writer, podcast creator and host, lyricist, photographer, a well-traveled and seasoned Midwestern kid, beginning his third act in this life for himself and in that others. Traded in his suit for a van, a mic, and some questions. He's roughly 12 months into this journey, and it's given him so much more than he imagined. 200 guests walking through the most intimate questions about their views on life has been amazing. This alone is powerful, all the small stories of human tragedy, overcoming life, and finding our way as humans, let alone his own story of risking all as he is saved and built to chase his own dreams. He had a great run as an insurance executive in Asia, so many great experiences to draw from. So welcome to the Unearthed Man podcast, Ken Stearns. Go, Ken, how are you?
Stephen, thanks. Wow, sometimes I hear that bio and it's a little bit like, who the hell is that guy?
I know. I was a bit the same. I was on a podcast recently and someone actually did a 10-minute prelude to the podcast and they'd actually gone through and read all my stuff out. And I'm like, maybe I need to shorten that a little bit. There's a little bit of juicy stuff in there.
yeah, exactly. It's a little too much even for me. Oh, well, thanks for having me. I think what you're doing is really great. And, I think at some point man and men, became a no-go terminology and it feels like in society at some point, we're an endangered species, men being men. And I think what you're doing is great to draw attention to it, that, we need a support system. We need a tribe too.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I really appreciate that. And it's something I've actually found now, like just where the guys are. Just recently I had a guy reach out who's, struggling with alcohol addiction. He's about to go into rehab, and he's been to rehab a few times before, but every time he goes in and comes out, he's got no one. But this time he's like, I actually think I can get through this one because I have a community. I've got a group of men that I've been interacting with who are non-judgmental, who I can interact with them. They interact with me, and we all feel that we're on a journey together. And they start to realize that we've all got stories. we've all got a background. We've all had some challenges in our life. And I think that's one of the things that has come out for him. So he's got a level of confidence that, after the few weeks of him going through the rehab process, that he can actually lean in to, as you said, in this group of men. And the other men are starting to realize how powerful it is to actually just be held and supported by men that know how to hold that space.
Yeah. Yeah. Put me down as a volunteer. If anybody, I don't know if you have a volunteer system or anything outside of just the coaching part, but, count me in. If it's putting my name down and being there for another dude and, experience, I got a little bit of wisdom. I've got some scar tissue along the road. Not afraid to share some stories.
That sounds awesome. So definitely we'll get you connected in on the community, because that'd be great, because, doing things even like, monthly calls and having guest people come in, it'd be actually awesome just to talk again, just to have a different voice than myself and my co-coach, Matt, that helps these guys out. But anyway, before we get too much into my community, and really thank you very much for your kind words at the start. As you know, this podcast is a bit about, men actually being able to share their journeys and what's taken them to get to here. Now, we talked about where you've landed. You've given up role as an executive, and now you're just out, traveling around, and, you've put it all on the line, and you're out interviewing all these amazing people. But, you started somewhere, and somewhere along the life, you build up to become that exec. And I know the people that I look to support mainly are project professionals or corporate professionals, because I feel that they get stuck in this rut, that they're very ego driven, trying to drive for the income, or trying to drive for the title, doing the long hours, often have a lot of relationship breakups, don't have great relationships with the kids because their work becomes their identity. Now, I don't know whether that's where you're at, but I'd love to hear a bit about your journey and go from there. So I'll hand it over.
Yeah. I mean, everything you just said resonates, hard. Is probably the word I'd come up with. And it just reminds me of when I quit, when I had that moment, when I was finally a lot of preparation. I'll kind of do it backwards for a second, the most recent experience. And that was that moment that I quit, that I called my boss at like 4 PM. And I said, hey, this is what's going to happen. I've had this plan, and this is what I'm going to do. And that was quitting. I mean, quitting corporate. It wasn't quitting that job. That was it. And I was intentionally making that step. And it was that first move when I bet on myself, when I really believed in myself. And it was overwhelmed with emotion. And I picked up the phone and just to document it. And I was really saying, I'm a free man. I'm a freed man. And I ended up writing a song about it. It took now a couple of years to get it out. But the song is really about, we have these dreams as children, right? Young boys, we have dreams, be a rocket man in the sky, right? Or a doctor who saves the day, a businessman. And slowly I submitted to the corporate life and the corporate culture, and I signed my name and my life away. Bit by bit, I sold my soul. You gave away your freedom. I did stuff that made me not who I thought I was. I did be things in corporate that, is probably not me. Like, that's not me. Is that who I am as a human? And that process of always believing in yourself, right? Yep. Even though I went down that corporate road and I was doing that life, and there's seemingly no escape, I always believed in myself. But at the end, you have to rescue yourself. No one's coming for you in corporate life, right? You have to that is all up to you. Now they're coming for you, but in a different way. They're trying to kill you, right? Correct. So they're not coming to rescue you, right? If the knock is at the door, you probably don't want to answer it. And in that process of finding myself, committing and knowing you're going to be doing this alone. You're going to walk that journey alone when you do it for a moment. You might have faith. You might be able to follow in faith, and you might have that, but still, it's going to require you to make those first steps. And just the beauty of opening up again, right? Knocking down the walls, finding yourself, and then suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore, and I was free. Yes. And so, just this. This chance. And that's what I think for so many people doing this grind every day, especially, guys, a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations. And, we do what we have to do. And sometimes it's, you eat a lot of poopy at work,
Yes.
from other people, from bosses. You swallow your pride. You don't say things when you want to say things. And you do that because you've got the mortgage payment. The kids have got their hopes on a nice Christmas. Your spouse is taking a break from her work or their work, right? And, so you're always putting other people first. And that's not just for the home life, but it's also even at work to make sure you can keep the game going, right? Stay in the game.
Yep.
And it's not easy to break away. And for me, my story was I was very, I had a corporate job. It was a high kind of performance job, executive stuff in Asia, running around different countries. You kind of know, I'm sure you're living in Australia,
Yep.
You've seen these regional kind of positions, especially out of Australia. There's a lot.
Yep.
And, it's a crazy lifestyle. It's fun and it's super exciting. There's all that stuff, right? You're flying around a business class and you're attending these gala dinners and you're going to the nicest hotels and the nice restaurants, and sometimes not. I mean, I lived in a lot of developed markets. So I've also eaten on the street in my suit, and I've, eaten things that I would not recommend you eat, because that's part of the job. And eventually I got lucky and I had a job kind of slow down. I had that one corporate job. I was about 52 and I got a break. I mean, I actually got put out to pasture in a way.
Right.
I didn't know it, but I had a break and it was about to become a long break. And that moment, I rewarded myself. One of the best things I did for myself was I took that bonus check one year and I said, I'm going to do something for Ken. I'm going to go, and this is follow my dream. I've tried to play guitar twice. I'm going to buy that guitar now. I'm going to buy a good guitar. And I'm going to invest that money in myself. But I made a contract. I didn't do it freely for myself. I said, 2 years, you're going to try. You're not going to give up for 2 years. And you're going to have lessons. You're going to take lessons. So you have somebody showing up every week to just grind your ass, and make sure I'm doing my, because it's not fun. It hurts.
Yeah.
And you suck. And you don't want to play for anybody. You don't even want to listen to your own self. And I figured for 2 years, like at the end of 2 years, I might be able to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I could sing that for a grandchild or something, and they wouldn't judge me, And it turned out that was a magical moment for me. And I didn't realize it. And that contract changed my life in a way. Because I look back partly because I did it for myself. I did it for the right reasons. I challenged myself. I wasn't light. It wasn't just a gift. I made a contract. And so that had the opportunity for me to meet my teacher. And my guitar teacher was saying, after a couple of weeks, let's write a song. Let's write a song. Let's write a song. I said, bloody hell, man, I can't even play. I don't even know 3 chords. We're not writing anything, And it was kind of funny because about the 5th or 6th time, I was like, actually, I have some words written down. I started a book 4 or 5 years ago, and on airplanes, I would write some nonsense on a piece of paper that I thought was a good book, chapter. And then I wrote another topic, and I had all these 50, 60 pieces of paper with chicken scratch on it. So I went in there, pulled it out of the drawer after a couple of years, and opened up, and I said, this topic is probably a good song, faith. So I pulled out and I highlighted these phrases, which looked like decent lines in a verse, and kind of put them together, put a storyline behind it. And it's like, oh, after 2 Sundays, we wrote a song.
Awesome.
And I was like, this is so cool. Like, awesome, right? I was like, I did, like, this was not on my radar at all. I'm now a songwriter, and I applied for the U.S. Patent Office or the Copyright Office. I got a copyright on it. I spent some money and got it put into sheet music. And then I even was so stupid, I even recorded it. That's how far I lost it in pursuit of this dream of just finally doing something and following it. And I think, Stephen, following the breadcrumbs, right? Going all the way. And I kept doing the more, to the ridiculous end of actually, putting it up on iTunes. And that led me to finishing the book that I started. Because I love the songwriting so much. I wrote another song, and then I was out of words. I had no more chicken scratch.
Right.
so I was like, scratching my head now going, shit, I gotta figure out this book. Like, is there something here? And then I set about producing the structure of the book and the ideas behind the book and then the book became alive. And that was the pursuit that I didn't see coming. I did not see that coming. And, I ended up writing the book. I was still playing guitar. I was doing a lot of photography, got really into running around the streets of Asia, taking photos of strangers and all this kind of intentional things moving forward. I call it like momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow in this creative process, I had this idea of what do I want to do when I retire, when I grow up? What am I going to do? What's my third act? Because on this insurance thing, do I really want to be the stodgy old guy? Maybe I'll go into consulting, and I'll fly back and forth to Asia. Do I want to keep this game going? And I was like, I've been doing out here for 20 years. I'm done.
Yeah.
I did this and I rocked it, but I'm done. And, and I didn't know what else there was for me, but that being intentional about a few things and thinking about the future, they came together in the weirdest way, most magical way. I had an idea to travel the US in an RV when I retired, but I figured that was when I'm 65 or something or 70. And then the idea using somehow to start a podcast. I don't really know. I was actually kind of thinking of becoming a public speaker, but somehow the podcast idea came together, the book, using the book in the podcast.
Yeah.
And so what I ended up with this idea with the jar podcast is really there's 444 questions that come from this book. So I took the book pages, these letters, put them up on a computer on one side, and on the other side was an Excel spreadsheet. And I just would read the letter and grind out a few questions. And so I ended up with, so I got all the way to the 444, which is a number that was everywhere to me when I was in this creative process. I just kept seeing this number, 444, 444, 44. It was just like constantly coming. So I'm like, that must be the number. We go with 444 because you need to pick a number. Yep. How many questions are in the jar? I don't know. And the only thing is, if I did 200, people would still say, why 200? I don't know. But now at least I know why. And so it's great. So the conversations, and these are really good questions. I think the idea and the concepts are great for us as people, as humans, and then also men. I think there's a lot around this. If we look at the men part, the first part of this book that I wrote is really your self. I call it the book of self. And it's your yesterdays, your todays, and your tomorrows. So it's how we look at our past and how we think about the future and what we're doing and the value of what we do today.
Yeah.
And, and the past is nonsense. The future is irrelevant because it's not happening. Of course you can manifestation. There's a lot of good stuff there, but mostly we worry about of shit that's never going to happen.
Yep.
And it's about today. The next part was a book of others, which is me and you, between you and I, interpersonal stuff. And that's acceptance, forgiveness, and compassion. And so we talk about those topics, and there's, a bunch of questions around those ideas. And then the next part of the book is around kind of humanity, love, karma, and service.
Yep.
And a lot of what we talked a little bit on, and what you were just saying now is, I mean, you are in the servitude of man. Yes. Really, literally, fellow man. I mean, like, without the mankind part. And that's where that's a space you're operating in it. And you may be doing consultative approach, and it may be a business, but you're still in the servitude, right? You're still serving other people. You're putting you're putting them before yourself, right? Because you've got something to give. And I think that, and love, to do that, you're going to have a lot of love for common man. I think you talked about, the drinking, the drugs, the porn watching, all the bad shit that men do to derail ourselves and to knock us, we're our own worst enemy in that way.
Yes.
That thinking we can do all these things, cheating on our spouses, cheating physically, cheating emotionally, cheating ourselves, and those things so I think that karma part of the humanity and making sure, for me, if you've got the love down, if you're bringing in love into rooms where you go with people and you've got a good karmic balance, whatever that means to you. I think most of us got a pretty good idea. And then, service, and we're serving others. And then the last part of the book was faith, hope, and prayer. And wherever you're at on the spiritual spectrum, right? Prayer can mean different things: meditation, mindfulness, or nothingness. It depends on where you're at. But I think the faith and the hope. It's funny. The faith part comes out as faith in ourselves, right? I think the reality is faith can be the spiritual faith and having faith and having that faith. But the most important one at the end of the day is, if you believe in God, you believe in a higher power. At the end of the day, it's still up to you.
Yep, that's right.
No one's coming. Like we're saying, like no one's coming to rescue you.
Yes.
And we are our own worst enemies in one way, and we're also our best friends. Because it's also, there are times when it's pretty lonely being a guy, and the buck stops here. And the things, we don't tell family. The things we don't tell. I mean, I remember when the crisis happened, the financial crisis happened. It's probably the first time I'll tell this story on a documented show. But I got whacked. I mean, I lost my job. Like there's a surprisingly come in the room and you're out, and here's your here's your 2 weeks.
Right.
And I was overseas. I had a pretty heavy expense load going. It was like a really bad time. I would think I was funding like 3 apartments, different. I might have been separated. I think I was maybe still together. Right. And it was tricky. And I could not come home and say, I've been fired. Because that's just, no one can think after that.
No.
The whole family is going to be upside down with how does that impact me? My daughter be thinking about school. What about college? Who's going to pay for college? My other one's in, grade school. My wife would have gone, would have lost her mind. Consumed with the what ifs. Yep. So I just went home and went, yeah, I quit today because I'm a fucking baller, and I'm going to do something better and bigger. And they're like, you quit your job? I was like, yeah, because that's what you do. Yeah. When you're this good and you got bigger plans, that's what you do.
Exactly.
And, just making shit up as I was going along and just pray, and then getting on the phone as fast as I could and find a job. But it is, it's the absurdity of sometimes trying to carry around stuff without asking for help. And I think what you're doing to that end is great. Letting people know, letting men know it's okay. And this is kind of what my show, one of the conclusions, kind of just a little bit, another thought, and I'll pause. When I took a break, I started in April with the show. I came back in January last year, took a few months to get my stuff together, to get the gear and all the equipment and the logos and all this stuff. And I got it all together, and I started in April. And I have a video where I talk about the reason I'm doing this is I want to hear these stories, and I want to find the common theme in these stories across the U.S. And I did, and I hadn't seen that video since I made it a year before. And I was like, damn. And I do know the common story is mental health.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a crisis. And so I started a mental health company. I opened up a nonprofit.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I've got some plans together how to, put that corporate structure together so it's got its own ecosystem. We don't have to beg for money all the time. We'll have our own revenue generating companies inside, and it will allow the JAR Foundation to do its work. And, I think stepping back and seeing how much the mental health crisis has touched people, and, it's an opportunity for us to kind of come together and I think, put our arms around each other in a way, especially for some of the guys, and, reducing the stigma is so important. And, even I'm got people on my show. I just started another show, and they get on it, guys. I'm a business coach, and I've got autism, and I'm seeing a therapist. And I'm just going, are you sure this is good for your career, bro? You're a coach. Are you telling people you're seeing a therapist? Like, is that and you're on the spectrum? Even I'm having my own little voice in the head going, geez, man, that's a pretty good stigma. I'm not sure anybody wants you as a coach.
It's
Bloody
funny,
hell,
isn't it?
even that's my voice in my own head.
Mm.
And that's how poisoned even we still are. I'm in this space and I'm talking about like the positivity of it. And I hear somebody say it and I'm still, ooh, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
breaking the stigma rules. So it's we're in a great time because we can talk about it. And I think we can bust the stigma and get people to recognize when they need help. And like I said, this is a great space to do it on shows.
Yeah. And look, to be honest, with the podcast, there's a couple of things I want to cover off, but with this podcast, episode 2, I just told my story. Now I have operated and still operate in corporate. So all these people that know me actually heard everything. And I went everywhere, like talked about the alcohol, talked about, sexual activity, talked about masturbation, talked about, pornography, talked everything. It just went out on the table, death of my dad and a whole lot of things. So it was a bit over an hour's worth of me just soloing.
Whoa.
That's my journey. And it was actually called My Journey. And I'm like, if I want men to come on this podcast and be willing to be completely open and honest, I have to go first. And I went first. And people were like, wow. Like people listen to it and go, wow. Like and even like for each, so I'm up to season 3 and I still talking to. So obviously we've just backed out of the back end of COVID's, and I was very open about the fact that I lost a job because I chose not to get vaccinated because I didn't want to go down to mandates. And, I struggled a fair bit and I opened up about all that and I always will. And so I will always, when people come to me, go, I have this issue and I'm feeling really challenged. I'm like, are you speaking your truth? Because speaking your truth will set you free. Because once you feel like you've set yourself free, it's then don't worry about what others think about that. And so when people sort of say, oh, you got a podcast? I say, yeah, I do. I said, have a chat to me after you listen to episode 2, because, you might see me in a different light than the guy you see at work every sort of day. And you might know a bit more about me than what you want to know. But I'm like, but that's me. That's my life. Like you've already known me. And so this person you see here today, that's the whole background story that sits in behind it. And so, I think that's a really powerful piece that we need to do. The other thing I just wanted to, there's probably a couple of themes that you spoke about, but for me, in my mind, I've wrapped it into a couple of things, which is everyone living in our systems and society today, and particularly around corporate and everything else, it's all about entrapment. For me, it's all about entrapment. I give you a certain salary and I expect you to work 9 to 5. I'll hold you to this job. I get to determine what your pay rise is or isn't. I get to determine what your bonus is or isn't. The bank will determine how much money they're going to lend you, which determines which suburb you can actually live in, which determines how many investment properties you may or may not have. So your life is actually controlled. There's this world of entrapment that we actually start to live in. And then what happens if we become dissatisfied with that entrapment without knowing that we're trapped, but basically if we get dissatisfied, we then divert ourselves into other elements because entrapment doesn't make us happy. How do I become happy? How do I get the serotonin hit? How do the dopamine kick in? How do these all things happen to me? Cool. So I'll actually lean into alcohol. I will lean into drugs. I'll lean into social media scrolling. I'll lead into spending more money than I actually earn because, I have to keep up with someone else. I have to have the big TV. I'll watch all my, all of a sudden there's a new HBO subscription service. I better sign into that because there's that one episode that someone spoke about at work and I don't want to be the person that misses out. So now I'm going to oversubscribe to all these TV shows. And there's all of these things that we start to do to try to make us feel better, I think, about the subconscious entrapment that we've actually caught ourselves in because consciously we're not meant to be trapped. We're meant to be open, free, living, ground hugging, tree hugging, barefoot touching human beings. And now we've got entrapped in this digital world and part of that, and the corporates want to keep us there. And the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry and all these others just want us to only have a certain level of health and only have a certain level of freedom on our money and a certain level of everything else. So we have to find a way to escape. And unfortunately, we find ways that will give us temporary triggers of these, hormones that make us feel a bit better.
Yeah, you could jump out of the cell for a moment.
Yeah, but ultimately that just makes us feel guilt and shame because, we ducked off into the bedroom and we watched a bit of porn and, and we whacked off for a few minutes and sure, we had the hit, but now I've got to hide that from my wife, or, I've snuck down and I snuck out and I smoked marijuana and I'm hiding that from my wife or my wife's hiding that from me because while I'm at work, she's at home drinking. And so she's hiding stuff and you have these relationship things where people are just now hiding because they're trying to escape. So for me, and part of what you were saying, that's the theme that came out for me, which is, we get stuck in this corporate because it's all around us. And then we try to find a way to escape from it.
Yeah, we absolutely. It's funny the way you mentioned that because it is literally one of the lines back to that song is, I gave all my freedom away.
Mm.
And enslaving myself is the price I'd pay. No one does it. We do it to ourselves. Yeah. I mean, it's a readily available path, and it's very attractive. Like we talked about, you get a nice salary, you get a nice house, you get kids go to the right schools, et cetera. Yeah. Depending on how successful you are, sometimes we're trapped, and our jobs are not that great. I mean, imagine I was lucky because I was trapped in a beautiful job. Mm. I had a beautiful prison. Yeah. And there's a lot of people stuck in and I've also been in some of the cells of the time I've served has not always been in great environments.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
As I've moved around. And it is, I think we're in a place where there is a lot of resistance. There's two groups now. I think there are groups who have fully succumbed. I think there are some people who have surrendered. And I'm not sure we can even talk to them. But there are a lot of people who know whatever's happening is not right and they're feeling it and they're looking for help. I think there's a lot of people looking for help right now. And these kind of conversations are super timely.
Mm. Yeah. I'm working at where I'm working at the moment. I've just been, because what I do is that I don't force anything, but I will drop in my thoughts and everything else. And I've got a really good relationship with the CIO, basically the chief intelligence officer or whatever, the guy running all the technology side. And so effectively with him, I was just saying a few things about where I live and the fact I've now moved down near a beach so I can get down to the beach every morning and go for a swim. And I was just talking to him about simple grounding techniques because he was getting a bit stressed. I said, just walk outside barefoot on the grass. He goes, what? I said, here's a tip for you. Take a call like you're often on your phone. Like, just walk outside. If you can't get near the beach, just try that. And I was talking the other day and I'm like, hey, how's it going? He goes, that's amazing. He goes, I actually do it. He goes, and I feel calmer when I'm on a phone call. I'm like, that's awesome, dude. There's a guy there that's going, hang on a minute, because he's saying, I'd love to move beside the beach. I'd love to do something like, well, why don't you do it? Well, I can't. It's like, no, you can. You can. The stories start to kick in about, I'm going to get my kids. And I was part of that story too. Like we sort of said we wouldn't move. We stayed in our suburban house with our suburban mortgage until our son left school because we wanted him to go to school. I got two kids and he was the youngest. Yes. And then we dramatically changed our lives, sort of thing. But that was interesting. The other thing I wanted to go back to, sorry, I didn't want to get too much into my story. What I picked up early on too, when you spoke about the guitar and the songwriting, was that it sounded to me what you started to do was surrender and listen to what I would call the universe. So you're like, even though you made the contract with the guitar, then you're like, then it led you down a path. And what I heard you started to say, which without your specific saying, was that then this thing come up and you said, I could resist or I could say yes. Like the song. I could say, I'm not ready for it. Or I go, okay, let's run with that. I've got something here. And then that led to this other thing. And for me, what I've heard you moved into in life now is that there's a flow in life that the universe said, hey, your time's up as this exec, but you can take all this knowledge and all this experience and all this wisdom, and you have an opportunity to apply that elsewhere. And we've put certain elements in front of you to actually help you guide you along that path. Is that how it's felt?
It's crazy. You gave me chills with that one. Like full on gave me chills. I don't know where I was. Like what was I doing when the universe, I'm assuming the universe is always talking to you and we're just not ready or it only talks to you when you're ready. I'm not sure how it works, But the one, like, a good example is when I started. I'll come back to the story about the guitar, about the universe. Let me start with that, because I left that story out, but it's exactly what you just said. And it was my first universe wink. Honestly, it was the first time that that the universe showed itself to me. I can say like that is probably the way. And so I'm with my daughter. We're coming back from Arizona. We're going to California. We go through Vegas. We're going to spend one night in Vegas. And I shared with her, I want to buy a guitar. And, it could have gone sideways. She could have, oh, Dad, that's stupid. Spend the money, blah, blah. She's like, that's great. You should do that. And I was like, okay, yeah, I should do that. And so, find a guitar center. She gets on the app and we find a guitar center. And so we go to this ginormous thing in Las Vegas. It's Vegas stuff.
Yeah.
And go into this room, and it's this beautiful acoustic room filled with, I don't know, 100 guitars, probably. Super intimidating. I'm like, I don't even know how to hold a guitar really well, like properly. I definitely can't even strum it. I don't even know a chord. And I'm just in there, and I'm a little bit taken back. Like I'm absolutely stuck right now. Everything in my mind was great. The idea was beautiful. And now it's not so beautiful. And I'm just like, what do I do? And I see a couple that I like, but and I'm holding them, but I don't even know what to do with it. I'm in a room full of guitars you're supposed to play, and I don't know anything. And so there's this one guy, though, I'm catching out of the corner of my eye. And he looks a little bit like me. He's chill. He's got some jeans on. He looks like a hipster. And he's playing guitar very comfortably on stools. And he's moving around. And it's like, and I just end up in front of him, directly in front of him like we are. And I'm like, hey, my name's Ken. And, this is my story. And what guitar should I buy? And I'm not the kind of guy, at least in my previous life, I wouldn't go up to strangers. Like, this is not what I would normally do. I'm friendly and I would like talk to people, but not like I need help, because I needed help. And I would never ask for help hardly. And the guy just looks at me and he goes, get the red one. And, I don't know what my face looked like, but if this is what he does all day, or he was an angel and he wasn't really there and only I saw him, I don't know. But he just get the red one. And as soon as he said it, I knew exactly which guitar. It was instant. But I was still confused. I looked at him very like dumbfounded a little bit. Like, I don't understand at all, but I know, but I don't understand why. And he's like, the one you can't take your eyes off of. The one that through a crowded room, you only see it. The one you want to hold, you want to caress it, you never want to let it go. And it was like some of the most profound stuff I'd ever heard. Like, I mean, it just struck me right in the heart. And I was like, thank you. I think I said thank you. I don't even remember. I was just like, okay. And turned around, went over to the wall, grabbed the red one, and I was at the line. And I never felt better about spending $1,500 in my life.
Awesome. That's beautiful.
And it truly was, that was the universe giving me my first wink. And, when I got back and I started doing and I met this guitar teacher, and this guy changed my life because of what he said and the way he was. And he's the most odd character. He's a Filipino. He's a bastard by definition. So it's a powerful word, but it's a good word in this situation because because he's not a bastard, but in the legal term. And the best part was his father was the priest.
Right.
Yeah. So he's a special cat, right? I mean, he's a special character. He's a very interesting human on this earth. And he's a great friend of mine now. And he helps on the show. We've known each other for I don't know now, 10 years or 11 years. And it's just been a wonderful human and impacted my life in such an amazing way because he was asking me to do something, right. Let's write a song. And I don't know what prompted him to do that either. Like, also we don't know. And then the number 4 came along. I started seeing these 4s and the 444. And that was so powerful. I ended up using the 4s obviously quite a bit. And fast forward, I called it the JAR project, or I'm sorry, I called it the Project 444. I called it that forever. And then I was chatting with this British chap, and I had written the business plan, and he's reading it. And we had a conversation around, what do you think? And I'm asking him questions. I was trying to, just playing this idea off. And he says, "Oh, well, see this very bespoke jar." And I thought, bespoke jar. Holy shit. I knew what I had to do. I had to call my friend that I had met 20 years before, a glassblower in Bali. And I met him, and I now realize, Stephen, I didn't meet that guy in 2003 to buy a piece of glass off of him. That was not why I met him. I met him for this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And how I knew that was true, because I called him and I'm like, "Where are you? What are you doing?" I haven't talked to him in 15 years. He's like, "Oh, it's bad. I'm in San Francisco. I'm depressed. I got kicked out of Bali. I lost my visa. My business is shut. My wife's got cancer. And I'm just fucking sitting here at home with my mom. I just feel terrible." It's like, whoa. Well, get yourself out of your funk. I got 4 jars we need to make. And so I commissioned him to make these jars, and it just lifted his spirits right up. He was like, "I got a project." And I told him the thing, and he's blown life into these jars. I have the most amazing magical jars, and they're built with intention and purpose, and each one has a name, and he's given it a thoughtfulness, and they're alive. They're part of the show, and they hold these questions.
Yeah.
And people, they reach their hand in there and they touch the jars, and these things they're part of the show in a big way. And so called The Jar.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the podcast is called The Jar because the jar is the centerpiece. But it was wild to only realize about 2 months ago, after all this time, that I met him for this purpose. There's no other explanation.
No, spot on. One of in my program that I run, within the first week, with basically, I think it's within the first few modules, I get people to map out their journey.
Okay.
And to talk about, some of the bad things that happen along your line, the traumas and everything else that you had to deal with. But also I actually ask them very specifically, who are those people now that you've looked back on that appeared randomly in your life that have actually all of a sudden made a difference? Because when we get to week 5, we talk about universal consciousness and how the universe works and how it operates. And so I get them to create this journey way back in week 1. And like, who's that person that popped in your life that all of a sudden gave you the job, or gave you the reference that got you a different role, or all of a sudden opened you up to spirituality, or did this? Like, it felt random at the time, but that changed the direction of your life. Map all those people down. And then I was like, okay, those people, because before you said, I don't know whether we're just not open to hearing the universe, or whether the universe at a point in time taps us. For me, the universe has always been there. And the reason why it's always been there is, if we go back, as you said, this guy that you met 15 odd years ago, the universe goes, we're going to place him in front of you. You don't know why he's there yet.
Yes.
But we're going to place him in front of you. And when you are ready to get out of your own way and allow us to help guide you where we think you need to go, the JAR project, you'll now realize why we actually inserted these people in your life along the way. This guy that you went back to say, hey, can you review my business plan, right? He's probably a guy you met as part of your corporate journey. And you're like, cool, here's someone I can refer back to be able to help me out here. And he's like, and he's gone, oh, this jar sort of thing, the bespoke jar, right? So all these people have just been dropped in. And so when I look back and I go, cool, I landed here, but I had to go through everything that I had to go through, because I wouldn't have the wisdom and the knowledge and the openness to learn. I had to have that experience, so that now I've got lived experience that I can actually now be better supporting men, rather than if I open myself up at 2025, who knows? But that's, I think, where we look back. So that, for me, like when you talk about that, when you say, when did the universe, it's all like, well, the universe has always been there. And now if you reflect back, how many of those people,
this is even more.
For me, there's things like the GFC kicked in. Same thing for me. I got a redundancy out of the GFC, and I look at it going, cool, the universe said I still had to go here, and I had to go here. And then when I talked about earlier, when I lost a job due to mandates, the universe wanted me to move into this men's space, wanted me to provide service and be a coach. I was in resistant mode. I was
Yeah.
dabbling in
Okay.
it, but not leaning into it. And then the
Yes.
universe goes, cool, we'll help you lose your job, a well-paid job.
You're a little
And
slow, Stephen. We're gonna help.
yeah,
We're gonna
that's right.
help you.
Yeah.
You're not quite that bright, so we're gonna help you.
Here's a big slap across the face. Like, we're really going to help you on this one, right? And that's
Yeah.
sort of when I realized how fickle my financial future and security was, purely
Oof.
by a pandemic could do this and I could have that. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm still reliant. I'm still entrapped at a certain level. So I now need to
Yes.
lean harder. So that's where I start to now really lean in to build my business as I'm going along. And so that's for me. That's where we go. The universe has been there from when we've been born, prior to that, but in this body, and it's just helped guide us all these little journeys. And all of a sudden, the people we're leaning back on, they were put there for a reason. They weren't coincidences.
Yeah, there are no coincidences, right? And that's like, going from saying that and not really understanding it, kind of believing it, and that would have been me a few years ago.
Mm.
Saying that like as a kind of a slight, but when I say it now, I ain't joking.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I meet people sometimes. I have this fun thing I do. My business card. I created this thick plastic business card. It's very high quality. It feels like a playing card, but it's about 10 times thicker than a playing
Mm-hmm.
card. And I use those for the jar questions. A little bit oversized, and they're very nice quality, so they don't get roughed up in the jar.
Yep.
And I made business cards out of a similar thing. And on one side is my contact details, and on the other side is a question from the show. And so I have these printed out, in like a card deck, and I shuffle them up and get different topics. And I always carry them. Because I know,
Mm-hmm.
I should
Yep.
always have them with me. Oops, kind of, sort of.
Yep.
There we go.
I can say those. Good quality.
And yeah, and so on the back side's the info. And so people pull. I pen it out and I say, question of the day, and people they love it. Oh yeah, they don't know who I am. I meet them in the elevator. I give it to them. And sometimes the question is the right question for that person at that moment.
Yes.
And I really do now believe that everybody pulls the question for a reason. And that sometimes these people only later realize why they pulled that. They'll be like, holy cow, 2 months ago, I met this guy in the elevator and he gave me this card. Let me go find it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it hits people square in the eyes. I was just with some friends from Asia. I hadn't seen them in forever. I don't really know them very well. We've been acquaintances, corporate acquaintances, but we have a bond of being expats in Asia.
Yeah.
So they invited me to their house. I spent 2 nights with them. Loveliest people, absolutely great. And it was funny. We went to go to dinner one night. We were walking out. We were in the elevator, and there was another couple in the elevator. And this is Florida. South Florida is a bit of a weird place because everybody's tattling. It's a bunch of old people who act like high school teenage girls. They tattle on each other. They're upset because her flower is pink and not this shade of pink. Like the dumbest stuff.
Right.
And so you're always a little bit tense. You don't want to get a neighbor upset. Yep. And so we're in the elevator, and I'm my usual, hey, hi, good evening. Where are you going? Da, da, da. How about a question of the day? And I could tell the lady I was with, the wife of my colleague, was a little bit mortified, right?
Yep.
Like, like the random gentleman in the elevators, assaulting us. And so and they played along. The couple played along very nicely. The husband took one, and then the wife took one. And husband kind of put it away. And as we stepped out of the elevator, and the wife, my friend's wife, was very apologetic. Oh, he's traveling and, So she's kind of like trying to like smooth the feathers. Like I'd done something wrong, right? A little bit like we had invaded their quiet time. And for me, like at this point, I have zero, I don't know, reservations about talking to anybody about anything, right? Like you, right at this point, I'm an open book now, and I got love. I'm coming from love. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, the point of the story is, the man put the card away. The woman looked at the card. And then when we all got off the elevator, it was that awkward goodbye moment. And the woman looked at me like that question hit her right in the heart. There's no way to describe it, but her energy and the look of, almost in a way, I saw her soul for a moment. Like, it was that piercing. The best part about it was, as we turned away, my friend looked at me and said, "Did you see that look?" He goes, "That question hit her hard." I said, "Yeah." I said, "It did. You saw that?" And he said, "I saw it." I said, "Okay, now you understand."
That's right.
Now you understand what I'm doing is, this is my purpose.
Yeah.
Is to go talk to people about this and make these. They're having we laugh. They're having a conversation in the car right now. I mean,
That's
that
right.
couple they're going to talk about this for a while, whatever that question was. And I didn't know. Usually I ask people what the question was, but we were all going in different directions, and
Yeah.
I missed the chance to hear her story.
But
But
I just
yeah,
love that. But and you're absolutely spot on about the fact that, you know, I was a big cynic when it came to, my wife and my daughter have always had the tarot cards and the different sort of reading cards and mystical
okay,
cards and dragons and, all these
yeah,
spirits and guiding angels and everything. And so I was always, but yeah, sure. Like whatever.
yeah,
And
whatever.
then, but I must admit now I have my own deck of cards that I'll use and infrequently I'll do the same thing. I'll say, okay, I'm going to grab, I'm just going to lay them out and grab. And it's really interesting about past, present, and future and what they come
Yeah,
and tell you and, and how you're feeling. And, again, these are random cards, but there's a reason why that one stuck out to you. And there's a reason why that one stuck out to you and, and
yes,
everything else. But back on the guitar story, I in Australia with the Australian Indigenous here, they have the didgeridoo, which
yeah.
is a men's only instrument. And so I got into learning it. Now I've fallen
Oh,
off a
very
bit, but I'm
cool.
going to go back into learning again. You've actually reminded me. I got to make a contract, and there's a local guy who can teach me. So I've got to go back and make that contract to myself to actually do it.
I love it.
But I went into a store to buy, a proper. I've got a couple, but I need a new beginner one. So I went to the store to buy one. It's the same thing. It's like you go and play it. And the one that I ended up being able to play was the one that was then for me because there was different ones and I couldn't quite get it playing. And all of a sudden this one, I could get it and I could play it. And it's like, okay, cool. That one's spoken to me and I was spoken to it. So now it's mine. And
Yeah.
this Indigenous guy said, hey, you should get, because it's a blonde timber. He said, you should get carved on it, your journey.
Yes.
Like burnt into the timber. So I've actually pencil drawn on it, but it's been sitting there for a while. But in appropriateness, I need to seek permission and I need to get an Indigenous person to do
Yes.
the thing because it's
Right.
their
Yes.
symbols about life and everything else. So it's me seeking their permission and I'll pay someone to actually get it done. I mean,
To help carve your journey
to
on
put
the
this little wood
guitar.
burning into it for this journey. And it's been
Oh,
awesome to go
lovely.
back and just see my journey that I wrote, that I
Yeah.
drew out across the whole thing. But yeah, that whole, what's that thing? The first thing you see, the thing that caught your eye, that's the one to go with. Like it's already there. Don't second guess yourself. Walk up and go,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Don't second guess. It jumped out at you. Go and grab that thing that jumped
As
out
soon
at
as
you.
he said the red one, I was like, don't. I know which one. That was the one. You're right. It is that second guessing, the fermenting things and kind of, not trusting our gut. And it's funny because I was asking that question about, was I always asleep or was the universe not ready for me? Or in the reality, like you said, I answered my own question there, I guess, which is it's always been there and it's always been showing me and laying the tools out, I guess is what it was, right? The tools are all there for me. They were all laid out and it was just a matter of me when I was ready to pick them up. And I think to your point about having the wisdom and the experience to be ready to embark on my purpose, right? I wasn't ready yet. Like I needed more cooking, but the universe does. It's weird because it can't give you everything at once. That would be weird, right?
That's correct. Very weird.
It's not the journey, right? So you pick these things up along the way. You're on this, this long walkabout and, we're picking these things up along the way. If we're paying attention.
That's right.
And, and I think, boy, those, it was funny with the number 4, when it just started showing itself, it was like just ridiculous. And it was
Mm.
just like everywhere, like table 44. I went to this restaurant in Thailand one time. I was staying at the hotel, and the first day, and this is when the number was starting, was popping around. And she sits me down and she's like, and they had this thing where you have a table number and then you leave that with the chef and then the food finds you.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a stack of these cards. And so, she's like, and you're in table number 4 today. And I was like, of course I am.
Yes.
Of course I am. Of course I am. Literally the next day, she sits me on the opposite end of the dining room. There's somebody else, maybe the same girl, maybe different. So it's weird. I'm a single person still coming in, and now I'm not in the front, right by the first booth, the 4th table. I'm literally somewhere in the back, in the middle of this room with, I don't know, another 20 tables in it. And of course, you're at table 44 the next day, right? And I'm like, this is bananas. Somebody has to stop this. Like, I'm listening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it is funny when it's screaming at you, it's really screaming at like your story about, oh yeah, well, yeah, you didn't take the first firing very smartly. So let's just terminate you again.
That's exactly right. Yeah, time for the big slap.
Right.
You've been really generous with your time. It's been a great conversation. I love this. The way I like to end up is just pretty much ask, because this, again, your journey has been brilliant, and I hope a lot of men really get something out of how we can actually move forward and get the freedom in your life. But for the men out there, is there a message that you would actually like to leave for them? I suppose that's the question for you.
Yeah. Yeah. My message would be the same message, I think, that for my lesson, for my own self looking back, and it's be intentional. So, I think if you're sitting there, and whether you want to get out or not, right? I think there's also, there's you're going to ride this out until you finish, and then you can do something else with your life, or you want to get out and do something else now. I think it's be intentional. So do things, and create momentum around things outside of work, outside of the something for you. I think the man part is, as a good sales guy, when I was buying a barbecue, once said, be good to yourself. And so be good to yourself first, and make that contract to make something out of what you're doing, and be intentional about what you're doing. Don't do willy-nilly stuff. If you're going to go join a rugby club because you've always wanted to play rugby and you're 45 and you want to go back and, and you want to try into the 50s, right? Do it purposefully. Get the training, find a coach, join the right team, get active in the league. If that's what you feel is something you want to do for yourself. So like that said, the contract, taking the contract out and doing that the right way. And I'm a big fan of momentum, and making mistakes. The other one around this on this journey is, once you're on that road, decide, do, act. The reality is, even if you're moving in the wrong direction, movement is still movement, right? I mean, a train is hard as hell to get, getting a freight train moving takes a shit ton of energy. It takes twice as much to stop it. You can't stop a freight train. I could push a freight train and get it starting probably, but if it was moving down the track, I could not stop a freight train. No chance. So even if it's moving at a slow pace that you push it at, it's still a formidable beast. And that's intention. And the universe will find you. I really believe that when I started my own journey, that's when the universe said, oh, the fire alarm bells went off in the firehouse, and the universe was like, he's moving, he's waking up, we got to go, it's happening, we got another one. And, so wake up the universe by doing something intentional, and start the universe, start it to coalesce around you so you can see more clearly.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. As I said, you've been awesome time. This has been an amazing chat. I've really enjoyed your I know your energy and your enthusiasm and your humor. It's been super fun. I
Thank you,
love the
Stephen.
journey that you've been on. I think it's also, amazing that you've just said, no, that's not, stop the corporate, time to step into this space, set up the not-for-profit, the JAR project, the fact that you've done 200 odd interviews, you get the 444. I think that's beautiful. So all the best with it. I'm really looking forward to staying connected with you. It'll be great to stay connected and, jump on a call outside the podcast land and just to be able to connect and just see how you're getting on.
Yeah, and see how, and I'm excited to see where you're not your business really, because it's not your business anymore. You're now in a purpose, right? You're living this purpose, and you're gonna create a little bit of a wind kind of a tunnel, a safe place for men to kind of jump in and build themselves out, so they can help find their purpose. I think you're absolutely doing great work, and let's stay in touch. And love to call in and talk, or at least. And just listen in one day to an episode of you talking to the 5 clients or 8 clients, whoever you get on a call, on a Zoom call, just hearing their stories, and just, saying, I believe in you and keep going.
That'd be amazing. I'd love that to happen. All right.
Let's stay in touch, Stephen.
Definitely. You have an awesome rest of the day. Much love to you. Thank you very much, Ken. And definitely we'll chat soon. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey folks, as I was saying to Ken, that was just such a high energetic, beautiful conversation. And I just love the fact that Ken just said, that's it. I'm out with corporate. Here's my purpose. I'm jumping on the van. I'm just going to start to talk to people. And I know through my journey of just having the podcast interviews with people like Ken and others, and just knowing what he's doing, just listening to people's stories and hearing what's going on with their life, and not living in comparison or competition with them, but just being there and open and compassionate for them, and understanding that people are just doing what they can every day and living their life. So I think that was just, I loved it. And I'm going to have a big buzz coming out of the back of today. So I'm going to wrap up there. As you know, you can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Just look up for Stephen Milverton. Outside of that, this is it for episode 68 of the Unearthed Man podcast. Sending you much love and peace. Have a great day.